We're the inspectors jointly appointed to examine the Lewisham local plan. Can everyone hear me? Thank you very much. Nods at the back. Can everyone make sure their phones and their electronic devices are all switched off to or switched to silent, please, while we're in the hearing sessions? And keep the microphones muted until you need to speak, so we can avoid any disturbance from electronic devices. So from the hearings so far, we found that you have to stay quite close to that microphone to make sure that it does pick up everything for the benefit of those who are watching remotely. The council is live streaming the hearings. Does anyone present have any objection to the live streaming? No? You? I'm just going to turn to the council for the housekeeping matters to remind us about fire alarms, evacuation procedures and facilities, please.
Yes, there is no planned testing of the fire alarm. So if the fire alarm goes off, it is a real fire alarm. The evacuation routes are clearly signposted within the building. The evacuation point, the rendezvous point, is on the Broadway next to the Costa Coffee. The toilet facilities are out the door and to the left, and there's refreshments out the door and across the seating area.
Thank you. So in terms of the procedure for the hearing session, it will take the form of a structured discussion, which we will be leading based on the agenda, which flows from the matters, issues and questions. Does everyone have sight of the agenda? Yes, you. So we'll try and bring you in at a relevant point, but if you do wish to make a point, please can you pop your nameplate on its side? It would be quite helpful if you could just tilt your nameplates towards us so we can see who's who. Thank you very much for that. So we have read all of the representations and the hearing statements were submitted. So just to remind everyone taking part in the discussion, you should have submitted all of the evidence in your original representation. So the hearing sessions are to discuss that, but not to submit anything further. So all comments need to be related back to your original representation. So we have a full agenda for today, so please do help us get through everything on that agenda. And it would be helpful to be as concise as possible in points and avoid unnecessary repetition of points where someone has already made a similar point. So respecting each other, allowing people to speak and finish their point, and just to remind people that questions should come through us rather than directly to other participants. So we've got a full day for today's matter. So we'll be taking a comfort break mid-morning, mid-afternoon, and we're hopefully finished no later than 5. But we'll see how we progress through the agenda. Does anyone have any questions about today's session? No? So we have been handed by the council a copy of some amended modifications for today's session, and I believe those have been circulated, so participants have got sight of those. So we shall come to modifications as and when necessary in relation to whichever policy or site it relates to. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, we don't have sight of those amendments.
Could the council get some additional copies, please? If you're connected to the internet, it's on the website. Okay, well, whilst some copies are being arranged, we shall do some introductions. So I'm going to turn to the council first, please, and if you could all introduce yourself, and we'll start with the council and go round the table. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. I'm David Syme. I'm the head of strategic planning here at Lewisham.
I'm Angela Stewart, Principal Policy Officer at Lewisham.
Good morning. I am Karol Jakubczyk. I am the Council's Planning Policy Manager.
Morning, Craig Newton, Town Planning Advisor for the Bakerloo Line Extension for TfL.
Patrick Clearwater, London Plan Policy Team at Transport for London.
Discourse Architecture and representing the Sydenham Society.
Annabelle McLaren from the Sydenham Society.
Angela Hardman from Phoenix Housing.
John McGregor, Lampo.
Sorry, could you just repeat your name? I didn't quite catch that.
Sorry, John McGregor, Lampo.
Good morning, Sean McGrath from WSP.
I think the light.
Sean McGrath from WSP on behalf of Sainsbury's.
Sophie Carty-Knight Frank on behalf of John Lyons Charity.
Nick Diamond, Knight Frank, on behalf of John Lyons Charity.
The Sydenham, the sort of the Belgreen Forum, sorry.
Thank you for that. Right, let's move on to the agenda. The first section is about the objectives and the South Area policies. So in terms of the vision and the key spatial objectives, in common with other areas of the plan, we understand the policy OL1 to set out the vision and key spatial objectives for the southern area. We have no specific questions on the vision and the southern area, unless anyone else has anything to raise or the council wishes to make any comment on it.
No, nothing further from us now.
Right, let's look at policy LSA1, the South Area Place Principles. So to the council first, in terms of the mechanisms that the council will use to ensure that development's appropriately phased and get that infrastructure in place to cope with the additional demands generated by new development, looking at criterion C. From the council first, please.
Yes, in terms of the infrastructure requirements to support growth and to support the level of growth, we obviously went through the community infrastructure matter, which set out in detail the requirements broadly across the plan period for a range of community infrastructure, and then also we touched upon the Bakerloo Line extension in matter 7, looking at public transport. Within the south of the borough, there are a number of key bits of infrastructure that are required to accommodate the level of growth anticipated within the plan period. there are a number of, or there are improvements to health facilities that need to be made, which flow from the One Public Estate strategy that was discussed in the previous matter. That is then translated into site allocations within the south area. We talked also about leisure facilities across the board, and we talked about the strategy there that has been developed and been submitted for examination, which includes a reference to the Bridge Leisure Centre as well to the south of the borough. In terms of the Bakerloo line extension, I think we've had extensive conversations about the timing of that. And the potential for that as an option to come further south from Lewisham Town Centre to serve Catford and to serve Belgreen, Lower Sydenham, and then on to Bromley. As we've said, there is no committed funding for that as of yet. The timescale has been, in terms of getting that degree of certainty, has been outlined by TfL. If I remember correctly, they were discussing works orders by 2030, 2029, 2030, and then moving on to completion 2038 towards the end of the plan period. Obviously, there's a degree of uncertainty there, which again we've discussed. Nevertheless, we do fundamentally believe that there's significant opportunity within the south of the borough, particularly around the Belgreen Lower Sydenham sites, which are essentially retail park, large single-storey format with surrounding car park, and in reference to London Plan Policy H1, which we've mentioned before, the London Plan clearly directs local plans to identify these brownfield sites as future development sites, which we have done within the plan. You'll see within the site allocations, we have a range of indicative capacities for those site allocations which could be impacted or affected by the Bakerloo line extension. The current public transport accessibility within that area is broadly 2 to 3. Now, the modelling from TfL, and TfL can correct me if I'm wrong here, suggests that if the Bakerloo line extension does come to Belgreen Lower Sydenham, then there would be an increase to 3 to 4 PTAL within that area. That would be subject to a number of detailed design considerations, such as the location of the new station or stations, which haven't been decided yet, and also improving pedestrian crossings routes through that particular area. Nevertheless, we feel that then demonstrates that there is an opportunity to unlock additional growth should the Bakerloo line extension be forthcoming, and there may be other options for improving the public transport accessibilities within that area. There's been discussions in the past about bus routing, etc., and frequency of buses through the southern half of Lewisham, which potentially could have an impact on PTAL as well. So we have a range within the plan in terms of the development capacity. I think one of the difficulties I think that Lewisham has is that the existing adopted London Plan has essentially removed the density matrix, which would have allowed us to control densities coming forward within that, in alignment with public transport accessibility. And I think we'll hear today from some of the participants today that helpfully, the majority of the sites and the largest sites within this area are unlikely to come forward within the early parts of the plan period. And that is fortuitous for two reasons. One is we will have a degree of certainty in terms of the Bakerloo line extension and the funding for that in the next 5-6 years. And that will then allow us to understand or be more certain about the appropriate scale of development and density within appropriate to those collections of sites. And then the second reason it's fortuitous is that we have the time to prepare a more strategic and wider development framework or master plan for the area in collaboration with the landowners and then obviously with public consultation.
Yes, I think there are obviously concerns raised through representations about the current state of the infrastructure. So I think that phasing of development sites does give that space to allow that further work to be done, to be prepared for additional growth and additional development.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, just to say, and I think there will be representations from participants, you know, quite rightly bringing up the lack of master plan to date. And I think the council acknowledges that acknowledges that we were in the process of preparing the master plan. We had started with a visioning document that the council was working on, looking at options for the Bakerloo line extension, etc. You know, again, world events take over. That visioning document has not been fully endorsed by the council, so is not a fully endorsed document as of yet. I think we acknowledge that a wider master plan or development framework would be useful for this area, and it is top of our priority. I think it's fair to say that we just need to somehow access some funding to deliver that. And just to give a sense of, you know, the scale and the cost, the New Cross Gate Area Framework, which was prepared in 2018-2019, cost the council for consultancy costs alone, that is in officer time or anybody managing the process, £200,000. The Catford framework would have been significantly more. I wasn't directly involved in that, but that would have been significantly more. And unfortunately, the council is just not in the financial position at the moment to commit to that. I am pushing. I would love to do it, and I am pushing, and my team is pushing for that. And I think it's important to say that we strongly believe that getting these sites allocated within the local plan could unlock funding opportunities in the future to then develop that master plan. Again, without going into too much detail, you know, I've constantly been speaking to the Greater London Authority. Because these sites are not allocated and because they're not covered by an opportunity area, there's no funding available. So we strongly believe as a council that the first step is to get these sites allocated, to set the principles, the strategic principles within the local plan, and then we can move forward with a detailed master plan. And just one further point on the master planning, and forgive me for this, but I cannot see any legal requirement within the NPPF or within the any of the guidance that says that we must have a master plan before these are allocated as site allocations. I only raise that point because, I think it's useful to bring this back to a matter of soundness, and consider, consider whether the lack of a council-led comprehensive master plan for the area is a matter of soundness for the plan.
Thank you. Belgreen Forum.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak here. First of all, can I stress that the entire community, the Sydenham Society, the Belgreen Forum, and all the other groups in the local area, have been adamant at pushing for redevelopment of this area for 10 years now. We are by no means NIMBY. We want this to happen. We've been held hostage by land banking, effectively, for a very long time, since the gasworks closed. Now, thank you for the rather late upload of LC36, the Bakerloo line extension, which the environmental impact assessment went up yesterday. So that has some really useful points about the proposed new location of the station. I mean, I've done my best to read it, but there's a certain amount of steering for which way the thought is, and that's really great to know. This is the reason we don't need every little detail tied down, but to get the most out of the area, to get the best layout for development, we need to know where the station is going to be, how we connect the buses to it. Just at that level, we need to know how the huge gasworks area is opened up again. Now, the Belgreen Forum have done a lot of work on this over the last few years. So has the Sydenham Society. I appreciate the shortage of money at the council, and therefore I think it's a real shame that we haven't been in the position to have a direct conversation and say, this is what we've got, this is the research, these are the local professionals involved at a high level in the development industries, and they know what works. We're not talking, fantasy land. I mean, I'm not an expert, but the people who are feeding me the information. So basically, we have a lot to contribute. And we want, I mean, the reason I've been pushing on the fact that the Bakerloo line itself will do nothing to improve the PTAL level is because we all want the best possible intensification of this site. We need new homes, but we need to know where the burden is going to fall. To get the best out of this, the developers are going to need to fund infrastructure updates. There are things which the council don't appear aware of, such as the problem with the electricity grid. There are currently 2 supermarkets at Belgreen, and they both have regular power cuts, which involve Sainsbury's throwing out loads and loads of chilled food on a reasonably regular basis. I mean, it's not happening every other week, but it happens. When Aldi opened, they were unable to connect to the grid, and we caught them out. They were using diesel generators to power their store. Now, Marks and Spencer's is about to open a store. That's a lot more chillers. Now, both Sainsbury's and Aldi were offered the opportunity to be involved in a potential heat store on the gas holders site. They were not interested, therefore nothing happened. We need decisions to be made strategically. We cannot have little piecemeal sort of elastoplast solutions. And so basically, I would like to see in writing, everyone knows it's the fact if you go into the details, but I want it in headline so that the community appreciates that in order to improve the PTAL, these things have to happen. The bus stops have to be moved. Which currently you have to walk half a mile from the station to get any bus. I think one bus in one connection, in one direction going from Belgreen to Bromley. That's the only bus which directly is outside one side of the station. There are no lifts. It's not accessible. So basically we need accessible and connectivity, and that requires a series of things. And there's no point waiting till the Bakerloon trains come along, because no matter what colour you paint the trains, until you get the connectivity right, nothing will shift. So there are other things we can be doing in the meanwhile, which will contribute to shifting it. And so can we bring that up the agenda and have it on the bill for the various developers who want to do things? Anyway, sorry, thank you.
Thank you. So just in terms of the South Area Place principles, from the Belgreens Forum's perspective, is there anything that you feel that is not included within those place principles, which run over two pages? And I'm conscious we've got another policy about regeneration as well. So
yes, there's an awful lot of overlap. What I would say, and we haven't made a specific, because there's just so many things we could comment about, but it's quite notable that the description of the area is very much based on the Bellingham sort of estate and the Downham estate. It's very much describing the characteristic of that side. It doesn't cover the section of the South area which is part of Perryvale ward and Sydenham ward, which has a separate, there's a brief mention of some Victorian stuff, but there's a lot of sort of aspirational middle class stuff done up Perry Hill, which was done in 1920 sort of thing. So it's a more complex picture than is given. I don't think that's a massive problem, but I do think it reflects the fact that our attempts to the thing about the lack of a master plan, we were aimed to produce one. We've got all our data, we've got our community keen to do it. We were blocked consistently. We started this in about 2018. We were formally going through this. We got through public the sort of opinion pot. Sorry, I can't remember the technical term. But so it went out for a consultation. People thought that looks nice, great, and then it was blocked by political or whatever, I don't know, but that was stopped. Therefore, all the discussion about we haven't got time, we haven't got money to do it. We were there, we wanted to do it, we still want to do it. We could do it quite fast because we've done all the work. So do you know what I mean? I think we'd be very keen to get in there and actually, bash this out over a few hours. We could get a lot of progress done.
thank you. I'm just going to turn back to the council in terms of the point in there about the characterisation of the South area and Belgreen's point that it sort of refers to Bellingham and Downham, but there are other areas in the south that make up the South area. If the council would like to comment on that, please.
Yes, we appreciate there are other areas within the south. The local plan is underpinned by the characterisation study, which looked in detail at all the character of the borough. I guess the reason that we're focusing on specific areas is that those areas are specifically targeted within the local plan for development or regeneration, and some of the other areas, the more established kind of residential character, are effectively covered by sensitive intensification and those policies that relate to that. I think if there are specific concerns, and I think it's worth saying that if I may, inspectors, we had a fairly fruitful discussion with the Culvery Green Residents Association yesterday, who through very kind of targeted points and changes that they wanted to make to policies and to objectives, we were able to discuss them at the hearings and then make agreements on how we move forward. And I think that's what the council sadly is not really understanding from some written responses to the areas of the south. What are the particular concerns regarding the policies, and what are the particular concerns regarding the site allocations?
May I, sorry, I'm just, I mean, obviously, when we come to the site allocation, we have very specific lists, and we have repeatedly tried to meet with you to have a discussion. We've been told we can't talk to you, come to the examination. And as I said, this is not the appropriate time to be doing it. And I apologise to the inspectors that we're doing it now, but this has been, this is the only time we've had a conversation, which is quite annoying. Thank you.
Thank you. Just wondering whether the policy could reference the need to improve that connection to and from the station.
Yes, I mean, clearly there's as part of the policy, there is a part in there about the Bakerloo Line extension, and then in part I, we talk about development proposals must help to ensure the south area benefit from high quality network of walking and cycling, walking routes and cycleways that connect neighbourhoods and places. We certainly could introduce, if it's not clear enough, whether that's in probably in part C, the need to obviously take account of the Bakerloo Line extension, but also plan for improved connections to any future station. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I think that would be helpful. Are there any modifications to policy LSA1?
Inspector, before I do my usual thing, you do have a request to speak to my left.
My apologies. I didn't see TFL down there. TFL, please.
Absolutely fine, thank you. I was just going to point out, there's just been a lot of conversation about a station, a Bakerloo Line station, and I just wanted to mention that as it stands, the Bakerloo Line project is considering all options beyond Lewisham to Hayes and Beckenham Junction, and through our single preferred option process, which is taking place now, we haven't defined any infrastructure in indefinite locations beyond Lewisham town centre. So I just wanted to make that point because there's been a lot of conversation about a station being provided. And as we stand at the moment, we haven't decided any kind of major infrastructure or new infrastructure at Bell Green in particular, because that's what this policy seems to be talking about. But it's just to highlight that, if that helps. And I could just possibly add on to that in terms of, again, there's been a lot of talk about connectivity, and generally what we would consider is there would be an improvement in connectivity if the Bakerloo Line was extended to Hayes, regardless of where either a new station would be or whether it's an existing station, and that's principally around the increase in trains per hour, which would be seen. And that also relates to then that connectivity, because if you change the patterns of how people travel, you obviously need to put mitigation in there as well in terms of that cycling, walking, bus connectivity. So I just thought I'd highlight that as well, because there seems to be quite a bit of chat on that one as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bell Green?
Sorry, thank you. No, I appreciate your point, though I'm a bit puzzled because are you telling, I mean, because obviously we do not know that we've been hearing about the Bakerloo line for 50 years or whatever it is. I don't care what colour the trains are. I don't care personally. I'm ambivalent, whatever. What we need is to have a station which disabled people can access. At the moment, you can't possibly do anything until you can get buses to connect to a station. So a new station has to happen, whether the Bakerloo line comes or not. And if not, how can you support? How can you regenerate the area? I've got letters from disabled people locally describing their difficulties, and I've now got information from Southeastern and about how we can tell all the local disabled people about the alternative access arrangements, which can run up some bills, but that isn't really a very sensible way of doing things. And, you know, I mean, decisions have to be made. Put the Bakerloo line aside. We need something, whatever is running on that train. You could put the Orient Express on those lines and it would not improve the travel experience for people in Belgreen.
Thank you. Well, I think existing issues with the network and things, I think TfL have heard your point clearly there. If you want to make a comment.
The only comment would be on existing facilities in this location, TfL is not involved at all. This is outside of TfL's remit, effectively. It's not our railway. Obviously, if TfL was to build the Bakerloo line and it went beyond Belgreen, any existing station would be brought up to TfL standards. And if any new station was built, that would obviously have to be built to our own standards again, which obviously in this day and age includes all disabled access as appropriate.
Back to the council.
Just a very brief footnote, which I hope will be helpful to the inspectors. I would refer them to the representations submitted at Regulation 19 by Network Rail, who are responsible for network railway stations, within which they speak to their own programme of accessibility improvements. Clearly, the council works with its infrastructure provider partners. Network Rail is one of those, and they are a partner in the wider sense in relation to the BLE upgrade and extension. We would obviously, the council as the planning authority will consider proposals to improve stations as they come in, and as they are supported by evidence of need for improving access arrangements. That is something I personally have experience with, and I'm certain my colleagues have experience with here in Lewisham. So there is a progressive programme of introducing such improvements across the network. But as my colleague to my left said, that is a Network Rail responsibility.
Belgreen.
Really sorry, really quick. Can I just say that Lewisham has done nothing about putting the station forward for that programme. I've been attending the Public Transport Liaison Committee for several years now. I had to formally do it and explore exactly what it takes. There is no programme open at the moment, but we discovered it was actually Southeastern who had to propose it to Network Rail, and they've been formally asked to do so as soon as it opens. But this is why we need the community master plan, because Lewisham has neither listened to us nor done their own work on this. Sorry.
Back to the council and some modifications.
Yes, there are no modifications in relation to policy LSA 01. The next set of modifications, if it's helpful, are to LSA 03.
Okay, let's turn over the page. In terms of LSA 2, which identifies the area as a strategic area for regeneration, I think we've heard from the council that by designating an area, it seeks to secure the investment, and it gives that opportunity to tackle the inequalities that we've heard from other participants in other sessions. In terms of identifying a strategic area for regeneration, just to the council, is it justified, effective, and consistent with national policy and general conformity with the local plan?
Yeah, so I think we sort of discussed this policy, and you summarised it very well there in terms of the need for this policy. It was a sort of designation in the previous core strategy, which was a fairly amorphous kind of blob, which didn't necessarily have a policy attached to it. So in line with London Plan Policy SD10, which is strategic and local regeneration areas, it states that boroughs should, one, identify strategic areas for regeneration in local plans and develop policies that are based on a thorough understanding of the demographics and communities and their needs. And two, seek to identify local areas of regeneration, taking into account local circumstances. So we've taken our cue from the London plan. We already had a previous, albeit fairly light designation in the core strategy, and we have applied a robust policy to that. And as you say, that it's an identification that there is a need to invest within this area, and whilst there aren't significant regeneration and significant redevelopment opportunities aside from the Belgreen Lower Sydenham area, there is still a need to identify this and to make sure that the council collectively, probably other departments and arms of the council as well, work together to secure that investment. We also recognise that in terms of windfall and sensitive intensification, there's some obviously there's the kind of small sites target, and again we're looking at within this area, what is the opportunity for small sites for intensification, and how can that then be used and coordinated to target some of that investment? And then furthermore, there is a series or a network or a hierarchy of town centres, established town centres, which obviously form the heart of those communities and neighbourhoods within the south area, and the policy overall in the south area speaks to those and speaks to improvements within those. Again, to improve access to facilities, local services, retail, but also jobs as well.
Thank you. Anything further on LSA 2? So let's move on to LSA 3, so Bell Green and Lower Sydenham more specifically. So to the council first, please. In terms of summarising the evidence to propose that opportunity area in the London Plan review, if you could start there, please.
Yes, so through the plan, the early stages of the plan preparation process, we commissioned the characterisation study, which looked at defining the physical characteristics of the borough and analysing that in detail, but also with a view of looking at a character-led growth approach, which essentially says, what are the established positive characteristics of the borough? What are the designations in terms of landscape designations, strategic industrial land designations, etc.? Where can we build? And where are those areas that are more appropriate or could accommodate the level of growth that we are seeking? Together with that, we were looking at the London SHLA and the process of identifying site allocations, and also London Plan Policy H1, which directs local plans specifically to look at low density sites and particularly retail and associated car parks. When we look at the character-led growth strategy arising from the characterisation study and overlapped those opportunities in terms of site allocations, it was very clear to us and hopefully clear to the examination that Bell Green Lower Sydenham presented a significant opportunity to improve the place and also deliver significant growth. So that is essentially the reason why we are putting it forward as a future opportunity area in the next revision of the London Plan. That's a principle that's supported by the council, supported by councillors, and generally, I say generally, supported by the public. I think everyone recognises, and I'm hoping I'm not talking out of turn here, but I think everyone recognises that the area as it currently stands, whilst it's performing a function, and it's an important function that we need to somehow retain and remodel, but nevertheless, it is dominated by car parking. It is dominated by a network of convoluted roads, etc. That needs to change in the future. And if Lewisham is going to meet its housing targets, its employment targets, and its retail targets, and if London is going to meet its targets, then these are very much the type of sites that are going to be required to be developed over the longer term. And just in terms of the sense of scale, the collection of site allocations combined are over 17 hectares of land. And I would say there are very few places left in our London boroughs where we have that scale of uncommitted land available. So the council feels that the opportunity area is strongly supported by evidence base. It has got general public and council support. And we also think that, again, it will unlock some funding so that we can prepare that master plan. So that's the council's position.
John Lyons Charity. Have you got a representation to this policy, sir?
We did in relation to the timescales of the the master plan.
the timescale.
I just wondered, I suppose, from our perspective, Mr. Sims, mentioned earlier that allocating the sites, establishing the principle, and there wasn't necessarily, a need for that master plan to come forward at that time. I think the point we wanted.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you just lean a little bit closer to the mic so that?
Sorry, is that better? Sorry. I think the point we wanted to get across, and we come on to it later, though, it is our slight concern is the use of the terms SPD and/or master plan. They can be very different things. An SPD, as I'm sure we'll all be aware, is something that is consulted upon and is adopted. A master plan may just be an indicative master plan. So I think we have some concerns around the sort of the leaky language in some ways. I think also what we picked up though in our representations is at point B, it does note that any proposals coming forward, development proposals must demonstrate how they have engaged positively with the planning guidance endorsed or adopted by the council. So we have concerns when you're coming forward with an application on your site, notwithstanding we don't believe there's necessarily a need for a master plan. The policy is in effect saying you've had to have had regard to that, and if that document isn't in place, then the wording trips us up.
Thank you. I think in terms of our questions, we'd picked up the SPD or master plan point, which obviously flow from the policy. But I think in terms of referencing something within a policy that doesn't presently exist, is rather difficult in development management terms when applications are coming forward and they're being asked to comply or demonstrate how they meet something that hasn't actually arrived yet. Now, I hear what's been said about the master plan and the need to get on with that, but it's not yet in place. I'm just wondering whether or not putting a reference in the actual policy itself is perhaps a little bit misplaced at this time, and it could be in the supporting text. If we had greater certainty on the timescale, the conversation might be slightly different. But our concern is that a reference to something in a policy needs to be present today rather than not at some point in the future. So I'm going to come back to the council.
Yes, this is obviously something that we had a conversation earlier in one of the previous matters, and I do appreciate that it is a difficult matter. I think obviously we have landowners that essentially are saying that they don't think a master plan is necessary, and we have obviously resident groups saying that it is absolutely essential and should be done before the local plan process. I think what we were trying to do with this is trying to strike a balance and say it is our intention. I think the wording is intends to, yes. So that is where we were trying to, clearly if an application comes in and we haven't got an SPD in place, then we can't assess that application against an SPD, and it will be assessed against the policies and the guidance that is in place at the time. I think we're just trying to and I'll be, perfectly honest with the inspectors, we're just trying to find a way through here in terms of we think as a council it's essential that we have a master plan and develop the principles in place, and that once that master plan is endorsed or an SPD is adopted, then development should respond to that. But I can appreciate that at the present time we don't actually have that in place.
Yeah, I appreciate. I think the council has tried to word the reference to the master plan quite carefully. It is something that we come across in other examinations and that we're very clear on. We have to be consistent. Looking at the wording, so this, the council intends to prepare a supplementary planning document and or master. I think just about getting away with that. It does go on to say the development proposal must demonstrate how they're engaged positively with planning guidance endorsed or adopted by the council, and I think that's probably a step too far in requiring compliance with a document that hasn't yet been prepared. I think that's the difficulty really that we have, and as I say, we do have to be consistent in terms of examinations across the board.
Well, I think the council will be guided by the inspectors, but you know, if we could keep the first part of the policy in there, I think that would be useful.
I'm going to come to the John Lyons charity first, and then I'll come to Bell Green. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it was more, I suppose, a point of clarification. We see the benefit of master plans. I think in this particular instance, though, our slight concern is that you're talking about, or the council are proposing a master plan for the wider area, and then, as we said, master plans for individual sites. But I appreciate that's another topic.
Thank you. I think the term master plans can be used at every scale, can't they? And I think your point is about what clarity over is it an area one, is it a site specific one, and how does that fit in? I'm going to come to the Bell Green Forum, and then I'm going to come back to the council for comment, please.
Hi, this is sort of a question, because as is blindingly obvious, I'm out of my depth here. But for us, the first thing we need to know about the sites are: can we have a landowner's agreement on the decontamination process? Now, for 30 years, we've been told you can't build housing on this site, and then things are moving, but there's a local lack of confidence, there's a lack of clarity. We have nesting leases inside nesting leases, we have ransom strips, it's a really complex ownership thing. Now, in the course of clearing it in different stages, what has happened as different levels have been created by spreading clean surface, so you have a certain depth before you hit the contamination. This is so we've ended up with rather difficult situations. We need to know that it is possible to flow from one site to another, to join up the things, that the whole place is decontaminated consistently, because it's going to be the cheapest way of doing it. If everyone is doing little piecemeal sites and then trying to clean up their site, it's going to get ridiculous, and everything will be compromised, and bang goes all the social housing. So we need an overall agreement that's cards on the table, and then you can hold your site as a retail park for 20 years or something, as long as there's agreement how we get from the next block to your. Do you understand? Rather than doing the whole thing, can we focus on that, because that would massively improve local confidence.
Thank you. Do you want to just pop your microphone off? Thank you. Thank you. Right, I'll just come back to the council.
Yes, in terms of master plan, development framework, SPD, there are lots of there are different types of approaches. You know, I can concede that. I think here, what we'd be expecting is a master plan or development framework similar to the one that we prepared in Catford, which sets out some clear principles overall for the area about how each of the sites would contribute to a successful place, how each of the sites would create open space, connections to, stations, how each of the sites would contribute to non-residential uses and create that kind of town centre, the local town centre that we are requiring here. But it wouldn't be, it's, and we'd also probably look at heights, but we'd certainly be working with landowners through that process so that everyone is in agreement with that overall strategy. And then further down the line, when sites come forward, then there would be a process of the kind of layout and master planning work on a site-by-site basis. Now, the framework or master plan, the wider framework and master plan would be flexible enough to accommodate any changes, but there would be agreed principles in place. And that's not a unique situation. That's a fairly standard and tried and tested approach across Lewisham and across London. There are lots of examples of, great places that have been developed with a wider master plan and then more detailed layouts and master plans coming forward in due course. In relation to the contamination issue, I don't think it's the place to get into too much detail in terms of contamination on the site. We can maybe talk about that in the site allocations. There are some contamination issues related to the gasworks, which we can come on to. I'm not sure if there are contamination issues related to the other sites, but it's not beyond developers and landowners to mitigate those constraints. London overall has many sites which have been contaminated. Lewisham has many sites which have had to deal with contamination issues. It can be done and will be done.
Thank you. So just in terms of that framework, and it's the principles that would be established in that framework, contamination as an issue would be able to feature as a principle where, so therefore where it's relevant within the area, then that gives that hook for then something to further look at.
I mean, it would be quite high level at that stage, but yes, that is one of the constraints that would be highlighted within that framework. But what the framework wouldn't do is it wouldn't be setting out a strategy for each of the sites on how to mitigate against that contamination, because the framework simply wouldn't have enough detailed understanding at that level of how that would then progress, and that would be left at the application stage for the applicants to provide the information on how the decontamination strategy would go forward.
Thank you. Sydenham Society.
Thank you, Mark. We'd like to say, first of all, that we strongly support the creation of an opportunity area. We also strongly support the creation of an SPD or master plan for the site, and think that it's important to consider the retail site in terms of its historical development as an industrial gasworks. So a few years ago, 2 gas holders were demolished, but actually the whole site was a gasworks. I think there were probably 10 gas holders. I mean, our understanding is that the whole site is contaminated. The perimeter is contained with a bentonite bund. So we appreciate the dilemma that the council has in not being able to necessarily fund a master plan, but we feel that it's really important that piecemeal development shouldn't proceed, and that maybe as an absolute minimum that the council should provide guidance for developers on constraints that would be set in dealing with contamination, because we think that due to the historical development of the site, it really needs to be considered as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're sort of moving into site. So just coming back to policy LSA3, the Belgreen and Lower Sydenham. So the area policy that we were talking about, and we've heard about an area-wide master plan that would set a framework with the principles to pick up things like contamination, and then it would be from that stage that more site-specific details and studies would flow, is my understanding from the purpose of this policy.
Absolutely, that is correct.
John Lyons Charity, is that another point? Is that
It was just a final point, and forgive me at the risk of sort of being a bit of a pedant. We're now talking about frameworks as well. I just feel that there needs to be recognition of frameworks, SPDs, master plans. Just I think for everybody's sort of benefit in the drafting of the plan, I think there just needs to be a little bit more of a focused approach as to exactly what that entails.
yes, noted. I think we tend to use the word framework as in more sort of common English usage as well as it can be the name of a document, but I think we're talking about master plans and SPDs here, aren't we? Just to set that overarching guidance box of things that help provide hooks for later bits of work. Any other final points on LSA3 before we move to modifications?
Sorry, could I just come in on C3, please? Now, we very much support the idea of residential-led mixed-use quarter with a distinct urban character. We're slightly baffled as how this is going to happen when Belgreen hasn't been given any status on the retail hierarchy. There's no acknowledgement of what's there already, but in different parts of different documents, there's mentions of there's a local centre here. There's different kinds of centres have been mentioned as a possibility. There are things we would very much like to push for. In all the background documents, it's talking about the various issues which are difficult about Belgreen, and we acknowledge it's a masses of issues. The idea of it dominating retail for potentially, if with an intent, we totally see the problem. It has already damaged local centres like Sydenham. They've got an M&S coming down there. So given the need to have ground floor in some sort of commercial use, we would very much like to favour a centre for the digital industries, creative and digital industries strategy, going for flexible workspaces because of the very poor employment potential at the moment, but there's a lot of potential. There's also massive potential for it to become what do you call it, a cultural quarter. It doesn't look like it, but hidden in the corners, there are some amazing things going on. We have, well, as well as the Livesey, we have different dance schools. We have an aerial circus skills school, very, very important. Where we have the industrial units scattered around. There are artist studios, there are film studios on the just over the Bromley border. In those by Lower Sydenham Station, you've got people involved in very high level design, sort of for like shop and displays and you know. It's all very undercover, but there's a lot going on, and it has huge potential to be developed. There's a huge chunk of London's musicians live within a stone's throw of the area. Lots of artists. So yeah, basically, we would like to push for being slightly quirky, being slightly different, rather than having inevitable commercial units which will not be filled because they're scattered on a percentage basis randomly around the place, which seems to be what is happening at the moment. And we'd like to push for something different.
And is there something in policy LSA3 that you feel meets that, or if there is nothing that meets that ambition that you've just spoken about for you know, creative industries and something different, what would you
I would
suggest to see?
defer to your knowledge. I mean, particularly looking at CD seems to be about the employment function and stuff. I mean, you know, I don't know where the appropriate place is, but I defer to you to know what the best thing is.
Council like to comment, please?
Yes, I mean, again, I think we're kind of aligned on this, which is reflective of the indicative capacities that we have in the site allocations and the significant employment space that we've included within the site capacities. I think if that isn't clear enough, then maybe we can suggest looking at the wording of Part CC, where we do talk about the residential-led mixed-use quarter supported by a new local centre, and then maybe in there we reference the you know, significant employment opportunities and job creation.
Thank you. Should we move to any modifications, please?
There are several. Starting with those that are, sorry, that they are all contained within submitted document PD11. The first of those is modification reference MO127. And that relates to supporting text paragraph 17.18.6. My apologies. I think I've possibly done this again. It's a reference to a site allocation, not the general policy. Moving on, modification MO128 speaks to supporting text paragraph 17.11. And it's the introduction of additional text there that states the Bell Green and Lower Sydenham area is being actively promoted by the council to become one of London's next opportunity areas. The council will support the designation of the Bell Green and Lower Sydenham area and make robust representations to achieve this as part of the next review of the London plan. Moving on, modification MO261, and that speaks to policy LSA 3 Part B, and that this relates to, I believe, the Bakerloo line extension, and I believe seeks to clarify the position of the ministerial safeguarding directions. So that introduces new text and deletes previous text. So the sentence will now read, so this is policy LSA 3 Part BA, ensure that development will not prejudice the delivery of the Bakerloo line extension, considering, where appropriate, the formal safeguarding direction made by the Secretary of State for Transport / Transport for London ... And those are the modifications. Thank you.
TfL, please.
Thank you. It's just to come to that modification MO261, as just pointed out by Carol. This relates to a matter discussed on the day of matter 7, and TfL, we went away with an action to look at proposed wording. We've now done that, and we can send that on to the relevant people after this.
So MO261 as written will be further amended based on further wording TfL to the council. And when can we expect that, please?
We can send it after this. Well, we can send it today or tomorrow, depending on if anybody else has any preference.
Into the council first, obviously, and then the council can consider it. Thank you. Okay, let's turn over to policy LSA4, which is the A21 corridor on Bromley Road. I think TfL have got an objection to this policy in terms of wanting specific reference to improving connectivity. And I was wondering whether or not that is already covered in Part D of the policy already.
Just to pick up on that point, that's not a matter I've dealt with on the A21 corridor, Bromley Road, in terms of the BLE. So, and I don't believe my colleagues got any further comments to make either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Does council wish to make any comment on policy LSA4? Do we have any modifications to that policy?
There are no modifications.
Thank you very much. So if there are no other points relating to that collection of policies, the overarching policies for the area, looking at the time, it's 10:48. It seems a opportune time for a comfort break, and then we can start looking at the site allocations. Should we say 11:05? Thank you very much. We're adjourned till 11:05. Okay, welcome back. We will resume the hearing session on matter 20. So we're going to start the looking at the site allocations now. So we're going to start at the top with SA1, which is the former Bell Green gas holders and Livesey Memorial Hall. So to the council first, in terms of the background in and how it was identified and the options for this particular site, please.
Yeah, so the site is an existing site allocation in the site allocations local plan 2013, albeit for mixed-use business, industrial, and warehouse. Didn't incorporate residential at the time. It was identified through the London SHLA as a potential site. At the time, it had a 0 probability. That was then examined through the characterization study and the evidence-based work that we had done, and also through our call to sites exercises in 2018 and 2021. And the site was then identified as a site allocation. In terms of the development potential, this is within the Belgreen Lower Sydenham opportunity area. So when we went out to regulation 18 and 19, there was a kind of range within here based on density assumptions. We have now updated that to reflect emerging pre-applications and applications that have been submitted. So we have an application, apologies, in terms of the land ownership, there's effectively 3 landowners on the site. The gasworks, which is the central part, is owned by Barrett's. There is the Livesey proportion, which wraps around, which is Apex. And then there's a small site to the south east, which I believe is still in control by the gas operators, and I think has a gas station in there, which will remain in situ. So we have got an application which was submitted last year, the end of last year, for the Barrett proportion. That is proposing 262 residential units. And then we've been pre-apping with Apex on the Livesey Hall and the remainder of the site. I have to say that's not as advanced. Obviously, they haven't submitted an application, and we haven't reached a position in terms of the scale of development. So there's still a bit to go there.
Also, as part of the application for the gas holders, they are currently proposing 780, and that's flexible retail and employment floor space. That differs from the theoretical approach that we had included in the site allocation initially, which looked at 465 square meters of employment floor space and 1,859 for main town centre floor space.
Thank you. So just going back up to the top of that information. This site was revisited in terms of its potential for development. What changed?
Well, I think when we were looking at the London SHLA, there was there hadn't been any interest in terms of developer interest at the time. The land was owned by another party, and also obviously the work that we were doing in terms of the characterization study informed our decision, as well as the call for sites in 2018 and then subsequently in 2021. So the land was sold. The developers expressed interest. It was a cleared site. It seems like it is a potential site allocation.
And this is sitting in the housing trajectory for 334 in year 5. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Just to be clear on the housing numbers, so the indicative development capacity in the trajectory is 334. The application with Barrett's 262, did you say? So it would just be the balance of the site to get up to the 334.
That's correct at the moment. Obviously, that additional 72 units is indicative at the moment because it doesn't reflect the kind of the pre-application discussions that we've been having. As I said, we haven't reached an agreed position on the scale and massing of that site.
And just in terms of the non-residential floor space, did you say that was staying the same?
So in terms of that, Barrett's have proposed 780 square metres of retail and employment floor space as part of the gas holder element of the site. And at the moment, the Livesey proposal is for residential and for community facilities, so retaining the Livesey hall itself. But I don't believe it has additional retail or employment within that.
It includes the reprovision of the community facility plus a modest extension to that community facility. But again, we're kind of yet to agree the final position in terms of the pre-application. So we may have to take that away and just make some amendments to the indicative capacity of non-residential use to reflect the Barrett's position, and then effectively a surplus to cover the Livesey site.
It'd be useful to get a feel for whether there's going to be a net loss again of retail and or main town centre uses and employment uses. Be helpful there.
And just in terms of the planning application that is currently in, what's the timeline for getting to a decision on that one, please?
So it's due to be considered by committee towards the end of July. That committee date has yet to be finalised, but there are 3 potential dates.
Well, Green, your nameplate's up.
Well, right, this site is what has got this whole business very heated, and I've just taken on some rocket fuel from a bit of a revelation we've just had from over there. This site allocation 1 is in the ownership of three main parties. So there's Apex, there's Barratt, and there's SGN, who are the operators responsible for the pressure regulation station. And by the way, could we please be careful with the wording, because keeping referring to this as the gasworks site, when you're talking to local people, you're really confusing things in planning terms, because everybody knows that the gas works extended right down to Sainsbury's and actually over onto Stanton Square as well, if you're that bit older. But there's very, very complex multiple ownerships. There's several other parties involved via ransom strips. The electrical substation, which is going to change hands in 2 years' time. So National Grid and Kier are certainly involved, or as well as SGN. Right. Now, I've just heard that that planning is in pre-app discussion with Apex. They gave us their implicit guarantee that no discussions were taking place on planning until the condition of the listed building was rectified. This is a huge trust has been betrayed on this site. The entire Livesey, the two, Apex and Barratt, applied that their allocation should be put together and treated as a single site allocation for reasons which are coming quite clear. Apex have bought a site which had an agreement to spend multi-million pounds on repairing damage. And it's our asset of community value. Strategic planning and legal of Lewisham Council lifted the protection of this and allowed it to be sold to Apex, who are now refusing to do the extremely difficult work which needs to be done. It includes the War Memorial, which is on the Historic England's Heritage at Risk register, and the front wall, which is separately listed. There are 3 listed structures. The front wall is deteriorating on a daily basis, and I'm astonished it isn't already on Heritage at Risk. There are bits dropping off it. So this has been done to us. This has been sold. It has been taken out of our hands. It has the entire parcel of Livesey land has been in sporting use continuously for 120 years. We have photographic evidence, can show you anytime. Therefore, it should be protected under the London Plan. It is all curtilage. It is entirely the same structure. I provided all the historical evidence you could possibly desire. I have dug up in every archive, and this is completely tied down. It also should be protected under the agent and change principle, because it is in a massively important community asset, as well as its wider social and sporting use, which has been going on for 120 years. It's of massive importance to communities for live performance, for very loud events, which cause no problem to anyone because of the layout. And yet we have been prevented by Lewisham from serious discussions about the implications of the agent of change. Now, I have passed on to Lewisham a message from the Theatres Trust, who weren't aware of the situation because Lewisham hadn't brought it to their attention, but I did. And they have asked for something to be inserted to have an equivalent protection description of the requirements for its servicing use and what, sort of protecting its usage as a performance space. to that which they've requested for the one in Deptford. So, and the other matter is, I would like to raise the question which I submitted to the inspectors a few days ago about what exactly is the status of this vision document. Now, it either exists or it doesn't in terms of this examination. It's not on the it's not been submitted as a supporting document or background document, or it's nowhere. Lewisham is citing it when it feels it's convenient, when it feels it supports its case, but we're preventing from using it, or in fact from demonstrating that it doesn't say any such thing as it's been represented as saying. In that document, which is showing the options for the retaining, if the Bakerloo comes and it retains the existing station, or it moves the station, or it has, you know, the various different options, it gives a picture of what they thought the amount of development was sustainable. In every case, that plan demonstrated buildings not residential being much further away from the Livesey to protect it. What Barrett's have put in an application for 50 bedrooms immediately overlooking the back of a performance space and overlooking the outdoor smoking bar area, which, given the smoking ban, is incredibly important to the viability of the business. We haven't been able to have any discussions about any of this, and we had protection, which has been, there has been no explanation. The only explanation for this sale being permitted is that they didn't consider it a relevant disposal, but there's no unpicking of that. There's no reasons. We're told there was a council's opinion on it, but we're not allowed to see it. There's absolutely no explanation, and I can see no public interest in this happening. There's no obvious public interest. No one has shared any public interest with me in confidence, in which case I would have respected the confidence. But we're in a very strange position. We are, despite being an incredibly deprived area, we are raising money to take this to court because it's a disgrace. And the entire Apex site should be removed from being available for development because it is protected under the London Plan as sports ground, under the listing as curtilage. You know, there are endless reasons, none of which have I been allowed to go through with strategic planning. So anyway, I will sort of now shut up and calm down slightly, but this is incredibly distressing. I've spent the last 8 years trying to protect this site, and my sense of humour is failing on this, thankfully. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come to the council to specifically comment on the document that Belgreen have referred to, and also the status of the asset of community value and what's happening with the Livesey Community Hall as part of the allocation, please.
So in terms of the visioning document, I make reference to the visioning document simply to demonstrate that the council do acknowledge that there is a need for a wider framework or master plan, depending on, you know, the terminology. I think I've made clear that that document got so far in the process, but was never endorsed by the council, so has never been approved, and therefore that is why it's not been submitted as a piece of evidence to the examination. That is the current position of that document. With reference to the asset of community value, clearly there's a freedom of information request in at the moment. It's with our director of legal to respond to that. I will defer to that and await that response to that freedom of information request. So the council has no further points to make through this examination on that. With regard to the Apex scheme, Apex are the owners of the Ellipse and the surrounding adjoining land. It is a listed building. There is a curtilage listing, and we have made it clear to Apex the constraints on the site. I would like to clarify, and the participant is absolutely correct. We did stop pre-application discussions to ensure that urgent works were carried out to the Livesey Hall, which we are still still working with the developers to do, to carry out those works and to complete those works. But we are in a position where the site is owned by a private landowner who is coming to the council seeking to redevelop and refurbish the Livesey Hall and redevelop elements of the site. As the inspectors will be aware, we have a duty to proactively engage with landowners that are coming forward with development, and that is what the council will continue to do on all its site allocations and windfall sites.
Mr. Hall, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. All I want to say in response to David's comments is that as you can see, this is it looks as if someone has just looked on Google Earth on a map and think, gosh, this is a nice bit of prime real estate, albeit brownfield, and we can fill it up with something. And of course, when you take local factors into account, it suddenly gets more complicated because someone else would have done that probably several years ago. And I think that's what we're now veering into. In terms of this process, what I would say is that the council's plans, they're incoherent, really. That's what we're grappling with, an incoherence of policies and a conflict. And that incoherence is exacerbated by the lack of evidence, and then the confusion of a so-called vision study, which is therefore a misnomer, because in planning terms, it's got no status at all. And that's been admitted by officers of the council just a few moments ago. So I think if that's compounded with a lack of public consultation, which is a matter for this inquiry, that's why we're in the position that we are. In terms of a specific site allocation, I don't really want to be too technical, but it looks to me that again, if we go underneath that first layer of looking at Google Earth and saying, oh, great, it's a site and we can develop it, there are specific constraints, and these need to be included in the wording of any local plan. And that's why I'm raising it myself. And those local constraints include, I'm not going to give an exhaustive list because there are many, but they definitely include contamination of over 100 years because it was an industrial brownfield site. I mean, that's just common ground. It needs to be included because whoever takes this site on needs to acknowledge that there is extra costs and risks involved. But on the plus side, some work was done when the initial development of Sainsbury's many years ago now, and that created a green corridor. And the council's shared vision has always been that this green corridor along the River Pool should be enhanced. Again, that must be explicitly included in this local plan. Again, it's common ground, and my colleague Julia there has mentioned it, a grade 2 listed building and structures. it's more than one grade 2 listed building. There are 2 structures that are grade 2 listed, 3, sorry, and they need, and so the need for master planning is essential. You know, not just in political terms, but in planning terms. And this, again, it's just been acknowledged by the council, has not even started. So I would put it to the inquiry that this needs to be explicitly included in any local plan, because emerging local plans will have a bearing on any planning application that is before the council now. And what mustn't be said is that there is no need for master planning. And I think it's the lack of explicit conditionality that is causing the problem. I have to then come to a conclusion and put it to the inquiry. So I put it to you that this section of the plan, because of its inadequacies, is null and void. And until such times as all those conditions, and probably more than I've explicitly mentioned, are met. But we're in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there are aspects there that we've got development guidelines in the plan in terms of the contamination, which we've heard a few times. We fully understand that. The development guidelines number 6 does detail about ground surveys will need to identify the nature and extent. I think it's highlighted there, and the council does recognise in that development guideline that there are significant challenges with decontamination and remediation. You know, other aspects, if the council would like to comment on Mr. Hall's points that he's just raised, please.
Yeah, absolutely. The council absolutely agrees that those should be within development requirements and the development guidelines, and are in the development requirements and development guidelines. So I have just picked up that there is a title missing from this, which should be development guidelines, I think. But development guidelines 3. Development requirements 3, delivery of new and improved public realm and open space in accordance with the site-wide public realm strategy that takes into account of and provides links to the nearby sink to the north of the site. So that refers to the sink in the corridor that the participant is referring to. Development requirement 6, development must be sensitive to the setting of the listed Livesey Memorial Hall and its curtilage, open space and structures, and the listed boundary wall and war memorial, and should incorporate it into the wider townscape by creating a positive relationship with new development. So that covers the aspect of the heritage, the listings on the site. And as you've pointed out in development guidelines, number 6 clearly indicates that there is contamination on the site, and that should be factored into any design proposals coming forward. So the council feels that it has addressed all of those issues within the development requirements and development guidelines.
Thank you. Yes, just in terms of the contamination point, given the acknowledged challenges associated with the decontamination remediation, is the time frame for the delivery of the site realistic?
I mean, we're relying on expert advice from the developers, Barrett's, who have experience of delivering on contaminated sites across London, and they believe the timescale is absolutely realistic.
And are there any particular safety concerns relating to those gas holders and gas pressure station? In the wider site allocation we're talking about here.
I'd have to get back to the inspectors on that one. I don't know the details.
So are the infrastructure requirements and costs and the physical constraints to the development, how would these be addressed to bring forward the site as a whole?
Is this in relation to site allocation 1 in terms of the former Belgreen? Yes. In terms of site allocation 1, we obviously have the contamination, the benzonite wall, which we've been working with the developer to understand the constraints and implications of that. The layout that is currently being assessed does that. There's also studies which have been supplemented, supplied to the council, essentially looking at what those constraints are. The contamination issue will be dealt with through the development management process and through the conditions, but we are assured that the contamination strategy is effective and will be effective. In terms of the Livesey site, clearly what the council wants is the Livesey hall to be refurbished as part of any future development on that site, which we are pushing Apex to do. Apex are committed to doing that as part of that development. And just to say, there is no further strategic infrastructure works. There will be localized issues, as we've discussed in the past, around road infrastructure, improvements to crossings and etc. But there's no strategic transport works that are required to deliver this site.
And is the council's intention to try and bring forward the allocation as a whole, getting landowners to work together, or will there be need for sort of CPO compulsory purchase orders?
We're not envisaging any CPO for the site. We have had workshops with both landowners in the room, and they have prepared a combined sites master plan for the area. There's also, as part of the submission from Barrett, an attempt, and I do use the word attempt, to frame the site in a wider master plan proposal, but the site is clearly coming forward before a kind of council endorsed master plan. But you know, the council acknowledges that, but it is an application which has been submitted, and the council has a legal duty to assess it.
Bill Green.
Right, well, first of all, can I just point out that the latest freedom of information request on our ACV sale, unlawful sale, it's not the first. They've already failed to respond to something like 3. We're trying ever more different, subtly different wording to try and get them to answer. They've refused to give even the wording of their requests, of their instructions to the council, let alone the response they got under legal professional privilege. So this is not, they've already refused to answer in several ways in public requests. The latest is a belt and braces. We're having one more go before we go legal. So,
Can I just interrupt there? I just want to ask the inspectors whether this is the correct forum to be discussing freedom of information requests to the council.
freedom of information process is a separate process, and obviously it's not. Freedom of information process is obviously a separate process, which I understand that you're pursuing that in the context of the local plan. That's not, whilst we hear what you say, that's not something that's within our remit. So we hear what you say on that, but that's a process that needs to carry on. So if you could just move on from that point, please.
No, of course, I totally appreciate that. I'm just trying to clarify the situation we're in and why we may not entirely take everything on trust. Now, realistic delivery. We have 2 sites. There is no way that Barratt can move ahead at the speed they say they want to. They had the option to buy both sites. They chose not to because very sensibly they saw the Livesey as a bit of a mare's nest. Nevertheless, the Livesey site includes the bentonite wall. The bentonite wall, no one is entirely been clear who is responsible for the actual repairs of, but it's on Apex land. It has been irreparably damaged. It's going to have to be substantially rebuilt to the south of the Livesey because some idiot planted 50 Leylandii, which the roots have done their job and the bentonite wall no longer exists. Further to that, Barratt's own documents say that the bentonite wall cannot have heavy plants driven over it because it will damage it. The previous owners, basically it has had, in the destruction of the gas holders, this previously clean site was used to decontaminate ground, and that was shifted by heavy earth moving plant. Therefore, they've damaged that bit of the bentonite wall as well. So you cannot do the 2 sites without, they haven't even assessed what the damage is on these two areas. Now, the 2 sites, because of this method of we're just cleaning our little silo, and then covering it with clean ground to whatever the made up ground to cap off the contamination. They're now different levels. The Livesey site is a listed site, so it's not impossible that the ground level could be raised to match that of the current gas holder site, but that's a listed building issue, and you need to have some conversations about it. On top of that, if you raise that, you're then breaching the bentonite wall. You'd have to rebuild the bentonite wall because in raising it by a couple of feet, you then get the potential for the migration of the heavy metals and very scary contamination, which is in the whole of the gasworks site. So there is no way. They have not even. I personally got the different developers to say, yes, they were willing to have a conversation about this. And can we have a meeting? And then planning said no, firstly, because there was a live planning application, and then because there was an election and whatever. And then they said, oh, well, you can have it with them. Well, why would developers want, they don't want a meeting with me. They want to have it with the organ grinder. I mean, so like everybody wants this to happen. I mean, Barratt said, oh yeah, that would be great. And we can bring along SGN and Kia, who are also involved. So it's like you could have had a party. And I've been since saying, why aren't you doing this? I do not believe that Barratt intend to actually see this through, because I think they want a rubber stamp of an intense development, which they will then land bank and at their own convenience do whatever. I see no evidence that they haven't started to do the test pits, to check out what is going on. We want affordable housing. All this messing around is going to price that out of the factor. So what I'm saying is this you need, never mind master planning the entire Bell Green. This quarter needs to, right, how is this going to work?
Thank you. And obviously you feel very passionately about the subject, and you're putting your points of view very eloquently. So thank you for that. We did say at the beginning about the need to be brief because we do have a lot to get through, and if participants could help us get through the agenda today, that would be fantastic. And obviously we do have all of your written representations, and we've heard what you have to say today. So thank you very much for that. Was there anything in particular the council wanted to come back on with any of the points raised there?
Just on the issue of contamination in the Bensnight wall, obviously the local plan does make reference to that. The both developers are aware of this, and Barrett's have submitted information which will be assessed in due course through the application. Barrett's are confident that those issues can be mitigated and overcome. Gas holder sites across the country have been developed and delivered. They are confident that they can deliver within a 5-year period, and that's the position that we're in at the moment.
Mr. Hall, anything more to add?
Again, it's very small. It's a very small point, but I think it's worth me saying this. I just noted down what was said, that there were no strategic transport works for this site. We've heard in other sessions about the Bakerloo line extension, the phasing 1 and 2, Transport for London are sitting over there. This site is within the phase 2. So I just question that statement. I think it's contradictory from previous evidence.
Thank you. I'll just come back to the council for final comment on that.
I think the point that I was trying to make is that given we have an application in that we have an obligation to assess, as a discrete application, there is no strategic infrastructure in terms of transport required. There will be some minor works around junctions, etc., as per any application coming in.
Thank you. Are there any modifications that we have to this site allocation, please?
Yes, inspectors, there are several. I will start with those that are in submitted document PD11. Kicking off, we have modification reference MO126, which relates to LSA SA01, and it introduces new text. And it's the new text is within the sentence that currently reads, and I will mention when the new text is inserted. The new text sentence will read: the council recognises the challenges associated with significant decontamination and remediation of the site. New text, and when necessary, will play a proactive role in the revoking of the hazardous substances consent, brackets HSC, close brackets. Moving on, PD11 identifies modification MO259. That's subject to the references in the addendum, so I will come back to that. PD11 also makes references to modification reference MO260. That modification by itself is redundant and is superseded by modifications in the addendum references MO310 to 312. So I will come on to those shortly. But moving on and finishing with PD11, we have modification reference MO127. My apologies, that repeats repeats the reference to hazardous substances and the revocation of the hazardous substances consent. That's specific to paragraph 17.18.6. Moving to the addendum, I will start with modification. I think sequentially I'll start with modification reference MO259, which relates to the table, and again, as per previous addendums, relates to the net residential units, updating that figure. So deletion of the previous figures and replacement with 334, which I believe has been referenced by my colleagues. Moving on, modification reference MO310 refers to paragraph 17.7 criterion 7 and inserts references to public realm, so that the sentence will read: the history and heritage of the South Suburban Gasworks site should be revealed through a site-wide interpretation strategy, including the heritage assets and their curtilage, reuse of the retained elements of the gas holder structures, insertion of new words within the public realm brackets where possible, etc. Modification reference MO311 relates to paragraph 17.18 criterion 3 and deletes the word through and inserts the word around, so that the sentence now reads: applicants should consider increasing bus services around the site in partnership with Transport for London. Modification MO312 relates to also relates to paragraph 17.18, but this time criterion 3, and replaces the words community asset with community use. So the sentence now reads: the hall should continue to be a focal point within the design of the site and be used as a community use. It continues with new insertions within the following sentence: public realm and open space should form an integral part of the design of the site, ensuring as far as practicable that the open spaces in the curtilage of the Lindsay Hall Memorial Hall to the north and south are retained as open space ancillary to the use of the hall. New words inserted, subject to detailed design. That finishes the proposed modifications. Thank you.
Mr. Hall, I'm going to come to Mr. Hall first, then the Belgreen Forum, and then finally for the council, and we're going to move on to the next slide then.
Exactly. It's just that I'm hearing the modifications, and as they're eloquently expressed by Carol over there, my initial view with there is that they're too equivocal. When you hear the word practicable, and all the qualifications, I think that this site has been designated as the Livesey Hall site has been designated as community use. The historic nature is accepted by the council. There's no need for such equivocation. So I've just put that to the for your determination. I just, again, a minor clarification. Gardens and open space, the Livesey Hall did include sports facilities, and I'm not sure if that's a separate classification, but if it is, it needs to be therefore included specifically and explicitly. And again, this confusion about public transport works. Again, we're hearing that we need bus services, but again, I put it to you that it is about the strategic Bakerloo line extension. The whole site is about that, and so I think some clarity about public transport, the need for public transport, a tighter wording on better understanding of the need for that is required, because it dovetails into the road layout. The road layout currently is going to be subject to change. And any developer needs to understand what is proposed. So I'm not quite sure how you would dovetail that together, but it's just a fact really, and I don't think it's been expressed adequately in the proposals we just heard. But thank you very much.
I'm going to come to the Belgreen Forum, but I'm conscious the council does need to respond, and Mr. Hall has raised 1 or 2 points there, so it.
Absolutely. One factual point. It was the Crystal Palace Gas Company, actually. If we, you know, that is the huge significance of the site, not the South Suburban. That was a later rename. But the main thing I want to stress is these are sports grounds. They always have been. The hall itself is heavily used for sports. There is a boxing gym currently in the grounds. They also have boxing matches in the hall. The other areas were from the very beginning designed, and I provided all copious evidence about the use of the site until the landowner decided to prevent the club from using that area of the site, and therefore they're not even allowed to tidy it up, let alone, you know, so that's why it looks derelict. It's not because there's no demand. Lewisham Council has triumphed in closing the entire sports centre for the Belgreen area, and that we're introducing more homes, and we're already at a point where we don't have enough sports centre. It's unthinkable that Lewisham is trying to weasel out of this is sports ground. The sports development team at Lewisham were incredibly excited when they have it, but they've disappeared. Presumably they've been warned off. But there is a need for it. There's a demand for it. There's lots of outfits want to use it, but they need to know they can still be there in 6 months' time. That's why they've all disappeared. Okay, thank you. So
Thank you. Would the council like to make any response to the points made by Mr. Hall and the Belgreen Forum?
I'm not sure the council has anything further to add in the interest of time. I think, yeah, we obviously heard what they said. We put forward what we said, and we'll take the views of the inspectors.
Right, we'll turn over to the second allocation. So this is Belgreen Retail Park. So allocation number 2. Could the council just come to the background to this and remind us how the site areas and the capacities have been derived, and what numbers the residential units we are now looking at, please?
Yeah, so again, this was an existing site allocation within the site allocations local plan 2013, mixed use residential and retail. It was identified within the London SLA as an exclusion site in 2017, which was then revisited by the council, but also in regard to the adopted London Plan Policy H1, which directs local authorities to effectively allocate these types of sites for redevelopment. I've got here one of the landowners has expressed an interest. There's been no objections being identified as a site allocation through the landowner engagement survey. We obviously have participants here who own part of the site, and then there is another landowner that owns a large part of the site as well. We haven't had any pre-application discussions, etc. So the basis of the development potential is based on the mathematical assumptions that we have described previously, taken from the London SLA and the publicly available density matrix that was published through the SLA. We recognise that obviously this site does have or is within the potential opportunity area, and therefore the net residential units expressed within the site allocation is a range, and that is essentially looking at the site's character in accordance with the SLA and the uplift of any potential opportunity area. So it would move from effectively what is a standard urban PTAL 2 density of 145 dwellings per hectare to 355 dwellings per hectare because of its opportunity area status, urban, and in PTAL 4 rating. In terms of the non-residential uses, we are aware that there are a number of valued uses within that area and a number of jobs within that area that landowners and the public have expressed their desire to retain that. We're also aware that we want to meet the threshold within the London plan for an opportunity area in terms of the number of jobs created within this area. So non-residential is a key component of the site allocation. We've looked at what is there existing and then taken a kind of percentage-based approach to the employment and main town centre use, which spits out an indicative figure of 3,740 gross employment floor space, and then just under 15,000 square metres of town centre floor spaces. In terms of just how that relates to the existing, that would be a positive plus 3,740 net gain in terms of employment, and then it would be around about a 5,000 net loss of main town centre floor space. Again, these are indicative and to be worked through in terms of the pre-application process. I think the loss is just to represent the more urban nature of the development that we would envisage coming forward as part of that site, as part of a kind of a local town centre. And I think, sorry, just to, if I may, just to add, you know, the council has experience of these more urban models incorporating supermarkets with residential above, incorporating trade counters, etc., with residential above elsewhere within the borough.
So looking at the viability and the deliverability, is the council confident that this site will come forward?
The viability evidence, the high-level viability evidence shows that in terms of there are a number of scenarios that are viable. Obviously, that will depend on the agreed affordable mix, the percentage, and also the sales value. But there are a number of those scenarios which are viable.
And in terms of its rate of development, is that is that realistic within the plan period?
We've got the rate of delivery mid and then towards the end of the plan period, and that reflects the conversations that we've had with the two landowners. The landowner which has the principal block which contains the M&S and or the application for the M&S, the Aldi, etc. There are some leases in there, 10-year leases, etc. So we anticipate that coming forward towards the end. I'm sure Knight Frank can update on the timescale for their component, but we feel that the trajectory that we've got in is fairly sound based on the intelligence that we've got.
Belgreen.
All I wanted to say is, similarly to the other sites, I'm hearing a lot about mathematical, calculations. I'm not seeing any evidence for the impact of the various developments, the impact of the heights, the sight lines. I'm just not seeing enough evidence. It's just the developer says it'll be fine. Doesn't seem to be sufficient to me.
Thank you. John Lyons, Charity, please.
Thank you. I think first and foremost, our client supports the principle of the allocation. I think a number of points that we wanted to make clear, and I think the point was made earlier, that the floor space figures are indicative, which is something we wanted to have recognised, and I think that's to be welcomed. The other issue I think we also have a slight concern is that it is a site with two predominant landowners, so whether there should be recognition in the plan that this is in multiple ownerships. Picking up your points around sort of timescales, yes, we feel that those timescales are achievable. We do have, our client has tenants in those buildings. They're not all let. I think roughly, I think there were 3 or 4 vacancies at the moment, but I think sort of long stop dates are the longest. I think lease that is in there is up until sort of 30. I think it's 34. But as we all know, in these sort of situations, there may well be negotiations to reduce that. The only comment I'd make, though, I suppose, in relation to timescales is that's fine. Coming back to the issue, though, of if we end up having multiple master plans or SPDs and significant engagement with various parties, that might well hold up matters. And I think just the other points I just wanted to raise, I suppose, from that is obviously the allocation talks about working in partnership in accordance with the wider master plan in terms of the wider the Belgreen and the Lower Sydenham, and also a site master plan. Not wanting to sort of repeat myself, I mean, partnerships, I think we would all recognise the benefits of working in partnership, but sometimes it doesn't always work. There may be different aspirations, etc., etc. In accordance with the wider master plan, I think we're probably of the view that there needs to be some sort of master plan for that wider area. But again, if you're then looking at a site-specific master plan, is that necessary? And I'll come on to that. And I suppose a question I just ask is that if it's concluded that a site-specific master plan is required, does that inherit the indicative figures that we're talking about here? And I feel that might be a bit of a bit short-sighted. As to whether a site master plan is necessary, we have contended that it isn't, and that a design-led approach would inform the capacities, the amount of public space, etc., etc. So there is no need for a master plan. The other issue we wanted to get across here is going back to, I think it's 17.21, which obviously says work in partnership in accordance. There have been discussions or feedback from the council that actually if proposals were to come forward, in advance of a master plan or those discussions, that wouldn't be considered premature. So it does occur to us that if it's not premature, then I think the wording needs to reflect that these discussions don't necessarily need to have happened.
The council, please.
Yes, I think I think we've discussed this on a number of occasions about looking at the wording here and making sure that the wording is appropriate. And I think I agree and disagree with some elements, but I think what the council is seeking is a wider master plan or framework to cover the whole area to set the key principles for the individual landowners to come on board and through a kind of design-led process, taking account of those guidelines or guidance, whatever we want to call it, develop out their sites. We do think partnership working is incredibly important, particularly because the site does have some key, key landowners. It's not all in one ownership, and I think there is a need to have that partnership working to agree those principles and to understand, things like what are the best routes through the site, through individual plots, where is the best location for open space, etc. So I think we're almost talking the same language, and I think it might be to do with just the kind of the wording within the policy. We have a strategic development framework or master plan that covers the wider area that sets those kind of principles, and then we'd be looking to the developer to develop their design-led approach and layouts or master plans, which the Urban Design Guide calls them, for each of those sites. So, forgive me, I don't think there's too much disagreement if I'm reading that correctly. It's just about the terminology of the words.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's a similar point, isn't it, in terms of the reference to master plans and whether that's in policies or whether it's in supporting text, and just being clear what the expectations are. So users of the plan know what it's needing, and also the council knows how to determine proposals further down the line.
Yeah, and just to be absolutely clear, this is a process we've been through before, and a process that we continue to go through. So, Catford Town Centre is a prime example of a series of sites in different ownerships, which has a development framework or master plan, depending on your terminology, which sets out those key principles. And then we have developers on individual sites coming forward and pre-apping on those. Now, there may be some amendments and changes, and inevitably there is in terms of, but the key principles that have been established within the town centre framework remain, and I think that's what we want to achieve within the Belgreen Lower Sydenham area.
I think the difference in terms of Catford, there is actually a framework in place that has been subject to consultation, but I think the wording in Development Requirement 1, in accordance with the master plan for the Belgreen and Lower Sydenham area, it comes back to that point. You can't require something to be in accordance with a master plan that hasn't been produced yet. So I think, yeah, it comes back to the wording of it really, but as a point of principle, that's not really appropriate.
Yes, the council accepts that, and we're happy to be guided by the inspectors in terms of the appropriate wording and where that wording is placed.
Now, do we have reference, or do we need reference to the heritage assets in this particular allocation? They need to be specified.
There are no designated heritage assets within this site application boundary.
And in terms of biodiversity and green space commitments, do we have those in the development requirements?
We've got development requirements. Number 3, delivery of new and improved public realm and open space in accordance with site-wide public realm strategy, including enhancing public access to the Waterlink Way. We've also made reference to the Sink Green Corridor, Metropolitan Open Land, the Pool River and the River Corridor Improvement SPD.
Thank you, Bill Green, and then John Lyons, and then Sydenham Society.
Hi, just to point out, there's a lot in there, the sudden reference to the sink and that. I have pointed this out repeatedly. The sink link that Lewisham has been insisting on is actually undeliverable due to requiring a path to suddenly go up 3 meters when faced with a bank. It looks great on Google Earth. It is completely undeliverable. I would like to point out that nothing biodiversity wise should be done off-site or sort of sent elsewhere. There is huge potential for improving the condition of the sink, and particularly the condition of the retaining wall in the service yard at the back of the West Midlands half of this part, so behind Aldi to B&Q. So there is a lot of potential that could be done there, so please do not go and do something somewhere else which is already in a better nick than Bell Green. Thank you.
John Lyons.
Thank you. I think there's just a couple of final points. I think the point we've got across, but it is, our view is that a design-led approach to this, having regard to policy, etc., will inform how the site will come forward. Will provide information on, as we said, floor space, heights, etc. And then going back to, I appreciate we've moved on from it, but DM3, where you do have a situation of multiple master plans if you're not careful. It's particularly, I think, it's even at C where it talks about, if there are multiple ownerships or joint sites. So that was the first bit. I think the other part we just wanted to be clear on, as we said, going back to the fact that it's multiple ownership. Yes, it's only 2 ownership, so that's better than some examples I think we've all had experience in. But we do want to just make sure that we, as dare I say it, the smaller site, the site which probably could come forward with less issues, given the nature of the national tenants that are in the larger site, that we're not actually frustrated from coming forward because perhaps agreement can't be reached, or the other landowners' timescales are at odds with this. I'm not suggesting they would look to frustrate what's coming forward, but they may have a completely different set of triggers or timescales. And I think the final thing would be, I think a lot of this can be addressed by demonstrating when an application comes forward, how it will not prejudice the wider regeneration of the rest of the site, or the neighbouring site in this instance.
Thank you. Sydenham Society. Thank you for being
Thank you,
patient.
Inspector. So we made representations about policy QD4 building heights when we were discussing matters 10. And in our comments on the draft plan, we did state that we thought that the heights that were set out in QD4 were excessive, and you suggested that it would be more appropriate to discuss those issues under the site allocations. Now, we've only been included on the agenda to discuss this particular site. Our comments on the draft plan were regarding the height limits, maximum height limits were set across the site. So I'd ask the inspectors to consider our remarks on this site to also apply to site 1, 3 and 4, because we believe that, as we said previously, that the former gasworks site should be considered as a whole. So first issue we'd like to say is that we strongly oppose these heights, and we propose that an alternative 8 stories would be appropriate, with potential for taller buildings up to 16 stories adjacent to a proposed transport hub in the southeast corner. So forgive me, I'm not talking just about site 2. My comments apply across, but I'll try and keep it brief. Our experience of development of Lewisham Town Centre and planning applications at Belgreen makes us very concerned that development will be piecemeal, lacking a coherent vision and failing to recognise or integrate with the local urban context. The Sydenham Society has always supported positive development of the Belgreen site. We are YIMBYs, not NIMBYs. We recognise the urgency of the housing crisis, but ask that the objective should be to provide high density to create a good quality domestic and urban environment. In 2019, our desire to promote a positive development inspired us to commission Discourse Architecture, who work pro bono, to develop a master plan for the site on which we widely consulted with the local community. We propose a reduction of the maximum heights in the local plan on the following grounds. 1, overwhelming local support for the Sydenham Society community-led master plan, which proposed street-based development with a maximum height of 8 stories, generally. And 2, the Lewisham characterisation study, which, as our colleagues in planning say, sets out a robust evidence-led methodology. I'll briefly elaborate these points, which I trust are relevant within the constraints of this hearing. If they're not, please tell me and I'll stop. Our capacity to make our voice heard is asymmetrical, we feel. The process is opaque for those of us who lack expertise in planning law, and we cannot afford expert legal support from a KC, like some of the other contributors to the hearing. So regarding the Belgreen community-led master plan, this master plan sets out a vision for the whole retail site with suggestions for interventions in adjoining areas. It comprises 8-storey street-based development, providing approximately 3,000 homes for 8,000 people, some built over retail accommodation or parking, a new school and a bus and transport hub, with associated taller buildings, uses including residential, offices, a health centre and a hotel. This is for the taller buildings. The Grade 2 listed Livesey Memorial Hall and its associated sports ground are developed as a performance, social and sports hub for the use of both new and existing communities. New green pedestrian and cycle routes connect Perry Hill to the Waterlink Way, Riverside Walk, blue and green space. This master plan is conceived as a first step towards creating a coherent vision for the area that reflects the needs and wishes of the local community. Feedback was reported in the Sydenham Society newsletter in June 2020. Consultation included 2 public meetings, online publication of the proposal, exhibition at 3 local libraries, that's Catford, Sydenham and Forest Hill. We received feedback from nearly 80 people, a combination of paper forms and the majority were online. We asked 7 questions, people to score their responses from don't like it at all at 1 and like it a lot at 10. And the average response for the whole range of questions was between 7.4 and 9.1. So it's overwhelmingly positive. We support the subsequent We Made That master plan that was commissioned by the council. It was very broadly similar to the proposal that the Sydenham Society put forward. Moving on to the characterisation study, I've got the text of the clauses, but I won't read it out in full to save time. And all I can say is I don't think that the quotations that I give are out of context. So in the characterisation study, 10.2.6 talks about the Belgreen neighbourhood is dominated by a superstore, other big box retail in its car park with 2 gas holders as prominent landmarks. Some modern blocks of flats have been delivered on the edge of the site. We note, this is me now, we note that Orchard Court is 8 stories and Pear Tree Court is 4 stories. There are no buildings taller than 9 stories in the south of the borough. Section 10.2.7. The western boundary follows the shifting character from the interwar semi-detached houses to the Victorian streets associated with Forest Hill. And we'd like to note these terraces are all 2 stories: Perry Hill, Perry Rise and Selworthy Road. And we'd like to add the Grade 2 listed Lewisham Memorial Hall on the west of the site is single story, and associated grounds and bowling green and tennis courts would all be affected by full development. And then going on to opportunities to intensify use of big box retail sites, which we completely support. Section 4.3.49 talks about the opportunities. And it says in that the intensification of retail shed sites should be encouraged across the borough to improve the continuity of these areas, use land efficiently, and this is important, knit these sites back into surrounding neighbourhoods. And this is why a master plan is absolutely essential in our view. Okay. And then in the conclusions of the characterisation study, 11.2.4, it says, all interventions should be informed by the historic evolution and character of the area. So this is why, again, we feel that it's very important that this coherent development takes on board infrastructure requirements, but also recognises the existing character of the urban context. In 11, I'm nearly there now, 11.2.5, yeah, again, it says, talks about the big box retail sites in Catford and at Belgreen, presenting opportunities for more fundamental intervention. We agree with that, to reimagine the area through redevelopment, and this is important, again, that creates better connectivity and knits into the surrounding neighbourhood. We feel this is why, again, master plan is essential. And just as a coda to that, I just say that the, as we noted previously under matter 10, the London plan clause 3.9.1 talks about high density does not need to imply high rise. We're pro-development, but on this site, we feel that the allocation of these sites as suitable for taller buildings is not appropriate. So we therefore conclude that it would be appropriate to reduce the maximum height of new buildings from 12 to 16 stories to 8 stories generally, with up to 16 stories only in the immediate vicinity of a new transport hub on the southeast corner of the site. You've invited us for our views. We ask you to listen to what we have said and please amend the local plan accordingly.
Thank you. I was going to come to the council for a comment on what we've heard, but Mr. Hall has popped his nameplate up as well. So I'd just like to take Mr. Hall's point if the council is still following the points.
Thank you, because my is very quick. It's just to say, and I had it written down, and I just heard the Sydenham Society say it. I couldn't see the evidence or methodology for separating sites 1, 2, 3, and 4. I want to join all my comments do relate to those 4 sites. We see that and identify that as a coherent, holistic area in the Belgreen area. And then I heard the absolute perfect argument about you can't have a master plan referenced in the plan that doesn't exist. And again, that's the conundrum we're all in. We want a master plan for this whole area, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So developers and other parties such as John Lyons, who I have absolute sympathy with, because without it, we can't progress this difficult site. Thank you.
Thank you. Come back to the council.
Yeah, sorry, there was a lot of points in there. In terms of the Sydenham Society in Discourse Architecture, you know, we've seen the work that has been prepared by Discourse Architecture and the Sydenham Society, and much of it is, you know, is similar in terms of the aspirations from a council's perspective as well. You know, we want to create a mixed use, thriving, successful place which incorporates the many of the existing uses which are valuable on the site and creates a more urban template format for this area and sorts out some of the issues such as the road network, etc. So I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of what we're trying to achieve. There is disagreement about building heights. We have obviously submitted evidence base to demonstrate where the council's position is and where we are coming from. I mean, just to elaborate again, this is overall in terms of the allocations for the Belgreen Lower Sydenham, we've got an area of over 17 hectares. The core Belgreen Lower Sydenham area is of a significant scale, a scale which can establish its own character. That is the principle and fundamental belief of the council. And I dare say we will hear from others around the table talking about viability and talking about building heights having, you know, possibly to go up. So the council is trying to get a balance here between excessively tall buildings and the kind of suburban character which is surrounding. What I would say is that there are some clear boundaries that this site has. So to the east, it has the river and the railway, which separates it from that 2-storey development. To the north, you have the green corridor and the sink, which separates it from the suburban character. And then to the south, you have the kind of transport infrastructure there as well. You know, I've looked at the development requirements and guidelines that we have, and we make it clear